This video will probably be a quick one because I want you to ask yourself some questions and I want to ask you, the viewer, some questions. Again, if you have paper and pencil, that might help you to kind of flesh out how you feel about some of the things that I bring up in this particular video. If you have not seen the first two videos, I definitely would suggest that you do so. They really give some detailed points to kind of help you examine racism as it relates to you personally, and it will help you to kind of understand your psychological mind, those things that you consciously deal with on a daily basis, and those things that you've experienced that are buried deep down within you. So I won't really go back over those points, but in this video, I wanted to highlight a few things, historical things, or just, thoughts that you may or may not have heard about, ideas, concepts, etc. The first thing that I want to bring up is in 2021, and in recent years, I'd say within the past 5 years, for sure, you will find, for example, television programs that have content that is very much connected to whatever is going on in the current society. You'll see programs talking about, George Floyd. You'll see television programs talking about systemic racism. You'll find programs that talk about inequality, in America, and so on and so forth. Some of those programs that I just wanted to highlight that I think are really fabulous, that are created by Black creators, Black directors, producers, writers, and some that may just have Black leads, the main character is Black, or the theme of the show is Black. For example, you have Ava DuVernay, who is amazing. When They See Us is one of the more recent things that she's done, maybe a year ago, year and a half at the very most, where she talks about the Central Park Five and how as teenagers, there were 5 youths that were basically railroaded into prison, and how their life evolved through that whole series, that whole struggle, and how they were eventually exonerated because they weren't guilty. But just to see how that plays out as minors, not even having proper representation in the police department. They were just treated like animals. They were just carted off and, pronounced as guilty. As we see often in society today, the police act as judge, jury, and executioner, which is not how our judicial system is supposed to work in this country. Everyone is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, right? So if someone pulled you over and just yanked you out of your car, put you in handcuffs, and took you off to jail, they didn't tell you what you did. They didn't tell you what the process was. We're going to detain you, or we're going to question you, or we're going to investigate. They don't do any of that. They just, cart you off to jail, or they shoot you dead right there on the spot. So if you have not seen it, When They See Us is the name of the Netflix, I believe it's Netflix, movie series created by Ava DuVernay. Amazing. It is a must watch video, especially if you are a white person who is watching these videos and you're trying to get an understanding of, what's the big deal? Why is this going on? On a lighter note, we have other shows like Queen Sugar, also created by Ava DuVernay. Wonderful family story about a Black family who basically owns a sugarcane farm in Louisiana. And you see all of the struggles, the ups and downs that are related to that family. And it's such a wonderful depiction, in my mind, in my opinion, because it doesn't deal with a lot of like street themes and, things that would be considered, like gangster or something that you might see in a police show. I can't think of any of the shows right now, like CSI or, whatever the other shows are where people are running around shooting each other. This is more, matters of the heart type themes in this show. And again, Ava DuVernay is one of the creators. This show airs on OWN, Oprah Winfrey's network, and it is absolutely, in my opinion, one of the best shows on television. It's not exactly like This Is Us, which is great as well. Love Sterling K. Brown and his Black wife and Black family in the midst of that dynamic, but Queen Sugar is about specifically this Black family and their ups and downs, their loves, their battles, etc. So it's an absolute must watch television show. Another television show is Blackish, and there's also the spinoff Mixed-ish. Tracy Ellis Ross is the daughter of Diana Ross, our superstar singer, and Tracy Ellis Ross in Mixed-ish kind of narrates, in a fictional way, I'm sure to some degree. I'm not sure of the exact percentage, of how she grew up as a mixed race young lady. So I'm sure some things are true, some things are not. But in Blackish, where Tracy Ellis Ross plays the mom, Anthony Anderson plays the dad, and they have a wonderful cast of characters, Jennifer Lewis, Lawrence Fishburne, etc. This show really kind of taps into Black culture in a really cute, kind of fun way. So you can watch that show and, there may be some things that you hear, some things that you notice that are both familiar and unfamiliar as it relates to cultural differences or cultural similarities. But really wonderful show. I believe, I don't know, they're like in season 6 or 7, something like that. So you have many seasons of that show where you can kind of tune in and see from a Black perspective things that, the relevance, the importance that we place on certain themes or certain events in our life. Another show is The Neighborhood, which stars the comedian Cedric the Entertainer and Tanisha Arnold. If you are familiar with Martin from back in the day, Martin Lawrence's show, Tanisha Arnold is a very talented singer, actress, and she's been in a lot of things and has been acting pretty much since she was a teenager. But with this show, they also have co-characters who are white. And basically the premise of this show, this white couple, it was really, really funny. They move into this predominantly Black neighborhood and they live next door to each other. And, a friendship kind of starts to develop, but it's very rocky and very funny, how they relate to one another. Again, there will be, some subtle cultural cues in the television show, The Neighborhood, that are expressed, just because they want to highlight it and make it something that's palpable for everybody in the country, for television viewers around the country when they watch the show. I'll give you one example. I want to say this is one of the first couple episodes. I don't remember exactly which one, but there was a joke about when you take a shower, cleaning your body with a wash rag and soap versus taking a shower and just using the soap against your skin. And it was really funny because most Black people, most Black families don't get in the shower and just apply the soap to their skin. We use a wash rag. You put the soap on the wash rag and you scrub yourself that way. So, just again, a subtle cultural difference, but the way they portrayed it and the way they portray certain themes in the television show, it's really funny, really cute. It really has more to do with their friendship and the development of that friendship, and not so much, the African American, cues and aspects and subtleties. Those things are definitely in there, but you see this dynamic between these two neighbors and how they have to coexist. So again, a really wonderful, delightful show that you can look at on television, to see how it makes you feel. What do you think? And just something that's lighthearted that doesn't have to be heavy every single time. There's a whole host of shows that I could probably name. All Rise, which focuses on a Black female judge in Los Angeles. All Rise is really great. And again, she has a friendship and a connection with some of her white counterparts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. New Amsterdam, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. The medical director of the hospital wants to make changes to benefit people who come into the hospital. But he has a very diverse staff, and he, deals with different issues. And I've really been surprised and applaud them at how they have incorporated a lot of the current events, as many shows have been doing now, including the pandemic, etc. There's a list of shows that I could probably go through, but those are some of the main ones for you to check out. The reason I bring up some of these shows is because I'm now going to kind of separate between past and present. At some point, maybe 6 months ago, I believe it was, I was watching a show on PBS, and it was talking about the road system in America and transportation and travel and, leisurely vacations and things like that. So if you watched the earlier video, I mentioned that when I was about 8 or 9 years old, we went down south to visit one of my family members. And I mentioned a footnote that my grandmother would always pack a picnic basket. And we also had this very large jar, a gallon jug, that would be in the car in case, one of us needed to go to the bathroom. Mainly my little brother and I, we would go to the bathroom in that jug, number one. So this was just my normal experience. I didn't think anything of it. But as I got older, and even watching this PBS special, which highlighted people like Dinah Shore and her commercials about Chevrolet, the new Chevrolet automobile in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. In these commercials, they were all highlighting white people who were laughing and having a good time and traveling across the country and going to Yellowstone National Park and driving to the Grand Canyon and so on and so forth. But in nowhere at any point in these commercials do you see a Black person, because during that time in the late, 40s, 50s, 60s, again, it could even be earlier than that, but I'm just speaking of this PBS program. Cars they weren't trying to sell cars to Black people. It just was a thing where, even though a Black person kind of created and invented the automobile way back in the day, a lot of inventions and a lot of patents were stolen from Black people. So they never really got full credit for their inventions or the money that comes along with it in many cases. So now the car industry is booming. Chevrolet is the big deal, like a Mercedes-Benz or a Ferrari or something today. So everybody wanted a car, so that they can drive across the country. And all of these commercials, even on the PBS broadcast, was talking about white people and, come and get your car. And they made it really affordable and really cheap for people to purchase them. So I'm juxtaposing that program against my story. And in my story, this jug represented, or the ideal of traveling down south for many Black people represented a certain system or a certain pattern that you had to follow. because you would have to drive through what was called sundown cities, where if you had to drive through this city after dark, you're probably going to get pulled over by the police. You might get lynched, etc. You might get shot or killed. They might throw you in jail just for driving in a particular city or state, and the sun has gone down. Again, another bullet point, Lovecraft Country was something that came out on TV towards the end of last year. Amazing. And they even touched upon that theme. Black cast, really wonderful show, really creative, amazing show, Lovecraft Country. But anyway, so as I grew up, I learned about, and I can't think of the other movie as well, like The Green Book, something like that. It was another movie that they made where for Black people, when we travel, we had to stick to certain routes. We couldn't stay in certain hotels. You couldn't eat at certain diners, etc. So typically Black families would leave early in the morning, like say 2:00 or 3:00 in the morning, if they were, like, say, in my case, traveling from Ohio to Georgia. So you would leave earlier in the morning. So you would be driving through your local area, your familiar area. And then once you get outside of your, let's say, the state of Ohio, once you get outside of that area, that region, you're driving mostly during the daytime. And once you got to your family member's house, you probably, if it was, less than a 24-hour trip, you would reach their house before it got dark, or, sometime, during the night. And you did not stop. This was not a joyride where, oh, there's an ice cream stand. Oh, there's a fruit stand. Oh, there's a lake. Oh, there's a park. Let's go see this. Let's go see that. Black people did not do that because it created too much of a detriment. You could run into too many problems with police, crazy rogue police who want to shoot you and kill you for no reason. Or like in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, where he's simply driving down the street and he's accused of something that he didn't do. And these citizens, vigilantes drive up in 2021 and shoot him dead in broad daylight. That's pretty much like almost, again, like a modern day lynching. So these kind of things existed back, when I was a little kid and before I was born. So the practice was you get up, you drive the whole distance, and you get there. There is no stopping. We're not taking no bathroom breaks and all of that. So of course, if you have to do number 2 or something, you pretty much have to stop. You can't really effectively do that in a car. That's kind of nasty. But I learned that the picnic basket was because my grandmother wanted to have food for all of us to eat. She would cook fried chicken. She would have bologna and cheese sandwiches and things like that, which to me was absolutely wonderful because it would be kind of hot inside the picnic basket. We didn't always have like ice and stuff in there. So the cheese and the bologna would kind of melt together in the little cellophane bags and the little sandwich bags. So when you got ready to eat it, it was kind of melted already and just, very good, ready to go. The chicken, of course, was already cooked, and we would usually have a huge thermos of water, that we would drink sparingly, throughout the trip. So that was the reason for the picnic basket and the gallon jar, which, of course, at 8 or 9 years old, I don't know anything about that. But as I became an adult and even seeing the PBS program that I'm mentioning, they go into some of these details about how Black people traveled at the time when America was starting to really build, from coast to coast highways and freeways and systems of travel. So beyond those things, you again get the backdrop of white supremacy, white power, white privilege, and you kind of tie that into the racism or the systemic racism. Again, the idea of racism, Black people don't need or don't deserve a car. Let them catch the bus to work, let them walk to work or whatever. And then the systemic part is whatever things were put in place to enforce that. Oh, you're in my city after dark, we're going to kill you. Oh, you want to own a car, you're going to pay 3 times as much. Oh, you want to travel and, have fun and, live a leisurely life. You better, avoid me at all costs, which means you have to drive from sun up to sundown in whatever direction you're trying to go. And of course, there's no such thing as speeding and all that. You have to really, be cognizant of where the police are. I just crossed a police car who's parked over in the woods. You take your foot off the gas, you don't hit the brake if you see them in enough time, and you just allow the car to coast and kind of slow down as you're going past the police officer. You don't slam on the brakes, you don't speed up. That's instantly, they're going to pull out and catch you. Everybody knows that. So that's, with Black people, that was a thing. Like you have to know that there is no such thing as joyriding and speeding, like we see in the movie where white kids are loaded into a convertible and they're hanging out the back, whoa, whoa, and screaming and hollering and acting a fool, and they zoom past the police, and the police pull them over and they're like, okay, what's going on? Yeah, none of that stuff. That's death to Black people. We don't do things like that. And so I'm bringing all this up because there is this assimilation part that I want to speak of in terms of racism and systemic racism that Black people have had to endure. We have had to be nice. We have had to be obedient and following the rules because anything else could have meant death. If you're walking down the sidewalk towards a white person in the, Jim Crow days, it was expected that a Black person would step off the sidewalk or step out of the way to allow this white person to walk by. There is no walking and colliding into each other. That was a criminal offense. You could get killed. You could get, sent to jail. It was illegal, to do certain things like that. You couldn't stare in the eyes of a white person. You had to bow your head and look to the ground and talk like I described in the last video when my grandfather was speaking with the police officer. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. And it was this very enslaved, subservient type mindset that was prevalent throughout America, throughout the United States. It does not exist today. And it really couldn't exist today because there would be way too many fights, myself included. I'm not going to be bowing my head, and I'm not going to be, I'm a polite person, but I'm not going to bow and scrape, because some white person wants to walk down the sidewalk and I have to, move out of their way because they're better than me. What? That doesn't even make sense to me. So, and it doesn't make sense to a lot of young people now. Again, hence the idea of Black Lives Matter. So those people who want to, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, and all this crap, if you listen to what I'm saying in this video, you can catch a hint as to why Black Lives Matter has now come into existence. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a fluke. It was very intentional, and it is very, very extremely necessary. So the idea of this assimilation that I'm speaking about, one of the questions that I want to pose to you, and one of the questions you can ask yourself, what do white people fear they're going to lose? They now have this replacement theory that they talk about on Fox News and stuff like that, and Trump and other people, have tried to publish this thought, they're going to come for you. They're going to take over your neighborhoods. What is he talking about? Like, what exactly do white people feel they're going to lose? And alongside that question, I have to ask kind of almost the opposite, in that Black people have endured racism for decades, centuries at this point. And we have a radar. We know racism at the drop of a dime. You don't have to say much. You don't have to do much. We know. We can tell. It's as plain as the nose on your face. We know racism when we see it. We know discrimination when we see it and feel it. We know without a shadow of a doubt. It is that prevalent. It is that obvious. It is that frequent. Almost we have a radar, and not to make fun or anything like that, but you know how some people say, a gaydar, you come across somebody and they're gay. They may not have said it, but you just kind of get you get an inkling because of the way they talk or because of the way they move. Even though that's a very prejudiced thought, it's kind of a real thing where sometimes you can kind of discern, whether somebody is depressed. You can discern whether somebody is mad. You can discern whether somebody, is new to a situation or to an environment just based on their mannerisms, and they may not have even said a word. So with Black people, we absolutely, most Black people, no discrimination, no racism the minute it happens, the minute it shows up. It's not a fear, it's not a question mark, it's not a guessing, it's not it's something that we've had to live with. It's an assimilation. And so I said all that to say, for Black people, as it relates to white people, regarding the subject of racism, the solution does not rest with us. The solution rests with white people, because you're the ones who are having the problem. When you see me and my dark skin and you feel repelled, that doesn't have anything to do with me. I may not even know you. I may not have ever seen you before in my life. You're walking through a park and you see a Black person sitting on the bench, and you get scared and worried because you think something's going to happen. So the solution rests with white people, which is why you will hear many people in BLM and other things, other TV shows talking about, silence is being complicit. If you're not speaking up against racism, then that says by default that you're kind of like in favor of racism, or you ignore racism, or you don't know about racism, you don't care, it doesn't matter to you, it doesn't affect you. I'm a human being just like you, but oh well, tough luck. That's, you were born Black and I wasn't. So again, it touches on this idea of white power, white supremacy, white privilege. Again, one of the reasons why I wrote the book, White Fragility and the Subconscious Mind, available on lulu.com and amazon.com and other places. But then the question becomes, white person, what do you need to do in order to end racism, especially if you don't consider yourself to be a racist? What do you need to do, white person? How are you complicit in supporting racism, white person? How do you feel about racism? How does racism register to you? How do you see it? How does it show up? What does it look like? What are the encounters you've had? And what did you do in that situation? So those are the two main questions that I want to present to you on this particular video. From this point, as you are, thinking about these questions and writing them down, again, you want to start to split the idea of racism, personal racism, versus systemic racism. It's two different things. But in the coming video, again, we want to start to talk about white supremacy, white power, white privilege. And when we say white privilege, we don't mean, oh, every white person is wealthy. That is not what we mean. What we mean is on equal footing, let's say a job interview. We have the same education. We graduated at the same time from the same school. We have the same degree. Our resumes are perfectly identical. When a Black person goes into the interview, they're looked at with skepticism. When a white person goes into the interview, they're looked at favorably. And there is no skepticism. In fact, the employer may say, oh, what school did you go to? Oh, you went to that school? So did I. Where did your parents go to school? Oh, I know. Yes. Your family is very well known, for this or for that. So yes, I know, based on your family's history, that you'll make a great candidate for this company, for this job, for this position, to make this much money. The same thing is true for banking. A Black person goes in, same business, same idea, same worth. And a Black person goes into a bank asking for a loan, and they're like, I don't really like the street that your business is located on. I don't really like, the fact that we only see 3 points of credit. We typically need to see 5 points of credit, before we allow you to borrow money from this bank. A white person goes into the bank, and the bank director is like, oh, you're starting a new business. Great, wonderful. Is this your first business? Oh, how exciting. Do you have any credit? Oh, you don't have any credit at all? That's okay. We're here. We'll help you build the credit so that later on, after we give you this loan, you can come back to us in a year or 2 years, 3 years, and we'll give you an even bigger loan, and we won't even change the interest rate. We won't even change your payments. We just want to make sure that you're successful. Oh, and your business is located on what street? Oh, I live 2 blocks from that street. It's that kind of insidious, infectious, diseased thinking that systemic racism is supported by. Personal racism, yeah, you may have biases, but then there's the structure that supports your biases. So that's what we talk about privilege. Your whiteness and your appearance as it is familiar to another white person makes them naturally inclined to say yes, versus a white person looking at my dark skin will say, that's okay, that's kind of good, but let me think about it. Let me look into it, because there are places of power where people have to make a decision to help me. And so the idea of like affirmative action, for example, there are so many white people who just get so mad and get so fed up because of affirmative action. It gives Black people an advantage. Yeah, because we haven't had one. We couldn't read, we couldn't vote, we can't drive anywhere, we can't own a car, we can't be in your city after dark, we might get lynched. It just goes on and on. And so that's why legislation and policies and things like that were created. Because unlike Tim Scott, our wonderful Black Republican who thinks that America is not racist, I completely and defiantly beg to differ. Even for him to say, you know, my grandfather sat at the table and read the newspaper, but I found out later he couldn't read. Duh, your grandfather couldn't read because he was Black. And the fact that you saw him pretending to read the paper is nice and wonderful. That was a very inspirational moment for you. But the fact of the matter remains that he was not able to read because this country, the country that you serve in Congress for, said that he was not allowed to learn, that it was illegal for him to go to school or to learn how to read. And you as a Republican stand and profess that America's not racist. Every Black person in the country was looking at him like he's crazy. So as I conclude this video, let me just check my notes real quick. Yeah, that hit everything that I basically wanted to talk about. And as we move forward, we want to touch upon, you know, white supremacy, white power, white privilege, even as it relates to proximity. For example, a police officer pulls you over. Is he rushing up to your car with the gun drawn? Or is this police officer kind of stepping back, you know, to give himself space, you know, a safe space? Is he de-escalating the situation? Is he talking pleasantly, you know, explaining, you know, why he pulls you over? Or is the police officer acting aggressively? Because we have to get to the point where we stop saying, well, I wish Black people would just comply. I just wish they would just obey. I wish they would just do what the officer is telling them to do. It's not that simple. So nowadays you'll hear the term anti-racism. And I believe there's a book called Anti-Racism. I can't think of the exact title right now, but it was written by, I believe, Dr. Kendi is his name. And it's a very popular book, again, that you can read because it starts to talk about, again, how we are affected on a personal level by things that we encounter or even things that we may not know anything about. So as you are learning about racism, I want you to look into some of the television programs that I mentioned to you. I want you to try and locate the PBS program about travel and Chevrolet and Dinah Shore back in the day, who was actually a very kind of progressive, liberal kind of person. She used to have a show called The Dinah Shore Show, and she would have Black people on her show. So it was never per se about Dinah Shore, but it was about what the commercials represented, that they didn't want to sell cars to Black people. And this whole system of travel and movies like The Green Book and, you know, Driving Miss Daisy and whatever else. Definitely take this time during this video to ask yourself those questions and to write down an answer so that in the next video, we can start to unravel some of the things that we've mentioned. And I'll add this little tiny footnote on the end right before I give you my email address in case you want to send a message, ask a question, etc. And this is kind of meant to be a comical point. If you live in a house and you see a cockroach crawling across your counter, nobody wants to live with cockroaches. Chances are, if you see that one cockroach, you can best believe behind your walls, under your furniture, back in the dark corners of wherever, there are other roaches probably waiting to come out. They're waiting to be seen. They're waiting to take over. ants and cockroaches will send out scouts sometimes just to, you know, scout the area, to pervade the area, to see what's what, you know, what's the movement like, what's going on, who's here. And just because you killed that one cockroach doesn't mean that you've taken care of the whole hive. So racism is very much like this. If you see or you think you understand one racist act, believe you me, there's 10 or 50 other ones right behind it that are just as ugly, that are just as bad, that is just as invasive, and they're just waiting to, you know, for the perfect climate to kind of come out and take over. If you're a dirty person and you leave food on your counter, one roach is quickly going to turn into 25 roaches. It's going to turn into 50 roaches. It's going to turn into 1,000 roaches. And if you're a person who's kind of clean, you may, you know, escape the invasion a little bit, but still behind the wall, in the cracks and the crevices that you don't see, that's where the problem exists. So I want you to think of racism as being like that. It's not such an overt thing as if to see one cockroach. There's a whole network and a whole hive, a whole system behind this invasion. And I just want you to keep that in your mind as you begin to look at different things, different videos, this video, and future videos. So thank you for watching this video. I apologize for taking so long. It was just kind of an impromptu video that I wanted to put together because I wanted to highlight some of those television shows and movies that you can watch. Everybody knows about Black Panther. Black Panther is awesome. You know, 50 thumbs up for Black Panther, but there are other television shows that are not fictional, are a little closer to real life as it relates to Black people, and it allows you to a small window to be able to look into Black world, Black culture, and understand why people are the way they are, why they feel the way they feel, why, you know, when a protest happens, if justice is not swift and immediate, people become enraged and they have to vent, they have to do something. And unfortunately, that results in buildings being burned and, you know, stuff being torn up and broken down and all of that, because people need to know, what do I do in this moment? And they can't keep that bottled up. That's not natural. That's not human. It's not normal for any person. If so, like I said, if a police officer pulls you over, white person, police officer pulls you over, yanks you out the car, puts you in handcuffs, and doesn't say anything to you, you're going to be upset. You're going to be mad. What is happening? This is not supposed to be happening. So I need you all to put your empathy hat on and understand that there's a reason behind these things. And the more you allow yourself to understand why and how some of these things happen, and explore Black culture, educate yourself on Black culture, you'll begin to see it's not arbitrary, it's not haphazard. These things have a reason for why they're happening and why we need to work together towards change. Systemic change, legislative change, cultural change, American change, whatever change you want to, adjective you want to add to it. So again, I thank you for watching. The email address, if you want to contact me, is douglagless@aol.com. And I'll spell that for you. It is DUGLAIGLAS@aol.com. Again, that's douglagless@aol.com. DUGLAIGLAS@aol.com. Thanks so much for watching. We look forward to talking with you on the next video. Have a good day. Bye.